Ahead, longtime Trump advisor Jason Miller and Ragin' Cajun James Carville. In all my years of covering congressional hearings, I have never seen such a bipartisan assault on a witness, Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., with key Republican senators joining Democrats at a chaotic hearing that challenged his hostile approach to vaccines, especially the COVID vaccine, quoting his own disparaging words back to him and challenging the firing of the CDC director.
As I said, I'm not taking vaccines away from anybody.
Did you, in fact, do what Director Monarez said you did, which is tell her to just go along with vaccine recommendations, even if she didn't think such recommendations aligned with scientific evidence?
No, I did not.
You don't know the answer of how many Americans died from COVID. This is the Secretary of Health and Human Services. Do you think the vaccine did anything to prevent additional deaths?
Again, I would like to see the data and talk about the data.
And you are sitting as Secretary of Health and Human Services? How can you be that ignorant?
I support vaccines. I'm a doctor. Vaccines work. Secretary Kennedy, in your confirmation hearings, you promised to uphold the highest standards for vaccines. Since then, I've grown deeply concerned.
The media, not surprisingly, are far more divided.
All day long, they all tried to paint him as anti-science and claim that he was hurting trust in public health. But RFK Jr.'s response all day long was essentially pot, kettle, black.
The goal is to try to get a gotcha moment, so where you try to figure out some way to capture this guy. But they don't ever give him really a chance to answer. And he interrupted them constantly, too.
He's the main person making America sicker again. And sicker for stuff that should have been in the history books. Children dying of measles in the United States of America.
This is someone who doesn't have his head in the sand. He has blinded himself. And the people that are going to pay for it are American children.
But President Trump, in the end, finally defending vaccines. I'm Howard Kurtz, and this is Media Buzz. Joining us now to analyze the coverage, Mary Catherine Ham, a Fox News contributor, and Megan Hayes, top official in the Biden White House. Mary Catherine, the media coverage certainly reflects that John Barrasso, who we just saw, who's the number 2 Republican in the Senate, being critical of RFK for an anti-vax approach that pretty much matches his career as an anti-vaccine activist.
Yeah, I think there's 2 things going on here. There is both a bipartisan attack on the Hill on RFK. Some Republicans who were willing to give deference to him before are saying, OK, what's actually happening here? There's also a bipartisan loss of trust among regular people and voters for the public health sector, which is RFK sort of the result of that.
Here's the cover boy.
Here's the problem. If you want to rebuild trust, you need someone careful and nuanced who has a history of critical thinking and is trustworthy. He is someone who has a record that is not trustworthy and has said many wild things in public about the things he is now overseeing, unlike, say, a Dr. Marty Makary or a Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, who are people who were critical thinkers during COVID, who bucked the trends, who said, let's look at the data, who overcame the pressure to do otherwise. So those people can lead toward public trust. RFK is a different story.
Megan, RFK also taking heat from for firing CDC Director Susan Monarez 1 month after she was named by President Trump for refusing to fire others who would stand up for mainstream science, and then calling her a liar.
Right, and she had to be Senate confirmed, and I think that you heard Senator Warren say, I was worried that she was going to bend the knee to Trump. I'm surprised that you fired her because she pushed back on you. So I think that's remarkable to build trust. That is what I think some of these...
their choice.
Exactly. These doctors, though, needed to do and continue to do. This is public health that's at risk here. And I think that the media is covering this, I think, well, because I think we are showing how unqualified RFK is to be in this position to oversee our public health.
So Kennedy's view is that everyone else is conflicted because of ties to Big Pharma, and he's the one depoliticizing it. But he's also the one who called the COVID vaccine, the greatest accomplishment of Trump's first term, the deadliest vaccine ever made.
Right. Again, you have the two sides here where he is spreading nonsense and also Rochelle Walensky was on TV saying this will not, you won't get sick, you won't spread this, when we know that she knew otherwise at the time during COVID, right? So you say public health is at risk. I think that's true. Also, public health trust died during COVID. It was one of the casualties. And so again, building slowly back to trust does not include RFK's rhetoric here. But I think the media does have to deal with the state of public health as it was when he arrived. And speaking in a nuanced way about the COVID vaccine and not treating it as an MMR vaccine or others is really important. It's really helpful for people 65, 70 plus who are or immunocompromised, but it's not as helpful for 20-something men who might get myocarditis. And those are facts that we knew at the time and the people were not trustworthy on.
I mean, just as an example, RFK says vaccines cause autism. That has been thoroughly debunked by the vast majority of mainstream scientists. Finally, on Friday, the president said this.
Look, you have vaccines that work. They just pure and simple work. They're not controversial at all. And I think those vaccines should be used.
Megyn, that's Donald Trump breaking with Bobby after letting him basically say and do whatever he wants.
Well, because I think he knows overwhelmingly this is a very bad political issue for Republicans. That new polling came out today, 67% of Republicans and 72% of independents think that vaccines are a good use to prevent diseases. And I think that's going to come to roost in the midterms.
Trump also hates bad publicity, and this has been an avalanche of bad publicity based on...
It also was his success, so he's been a little conflicted on that because Operation Warp Speed did bring great benefits to those who were at risk. The mandates are the things that turned people the other way, and on public polling, those are much more unpopular than the idea that vaccines are good.
RFK can't decipher between those two things, and that is the problem here.
Well, no one could during COVID.
But we have to live in the now. We have to live now.
No, we also have to take accountability for the past. And that's a very important part of leading towards the future.
And that is fine, but RFK is not doing that. He can't answer basic questions about COVID during that hearing. He can't say who died from COVID and who died from the vaccine. Those are really important distinctions to make to rebuild trust. But Donald Trump here is going to be in a real bind because the public is overwhelmingly telling you we do not trust RFK Jr. Suburban moms do not trust RFK Jr. Those are important voting blocks.
And I agree with Mary Catherine, though, that CDC had made a lot of mistakes, particularly during COVID, and that was the beginning of
But it doesn't mean that different is always better.
Right.
We can't just rebuke everything because they say a mistake was made.
Sorry, in a Wall Street Journal op-ed, Susan Moneras, who was being praised, a month ago, said she was pressed to fire staff and pre-approved the recommendations of a vaccine panel filled with people who publicly expressed anti-vaccine rhetoric.
This is a huge problem. To MK's point here, this shows distrust. The public does not trust people. When you have people who have overwhelmingly negative views on vaccines, why would they be on a panel for vaccines? That makes zero sense in public health.
Well, and you also need people who are critical thinkers, which is what we did not have during COVID. Once again, going to the accountability question, replacing people is fine, but you replace people with critical thinkers, smart people, careful thinkers.
And who are going to look at the data and the science.
Instead of those who looked at the data before and were like, we probably shouldn't recommend this for children, that we shouldn't do mandates, and then they did it anyway.
Wall Street Journal editorial called Operation Warped Speed says, is Robert Kennedy Jr. suffering from long COVID? And the usually pro-Trump New York Post called him a paranoid kook in a tinfoil hat. Trump is very sensitive to this kind of media coverage, and even in places that usually back him.
Yeah, I'm uncertain how long this relationship will last with that kind of coverage, and given that Trump is just saying vaccines work, they are good, which is a rebuke in some sense.
So you're saying, politically speaking, Bobby is in trouble?
We'll see what happens with the midterms.
Oh, I think he's gone long before the midterms.
Off.
I think he's gone before then.
I think also, Megyn, many people who want vaccines, I understand it's about the mandates, may now have trouble getting them. For example, you have to get a prescription, or there are lots of states where you just can't get it. It's not available unless you're in one of those highly suspect groups because they depend on CDC guidance. And right now, there is no CDC guidance.
Yeah, you're seeing this with what happened in Florida with their announcement of not mandating vaccines for children. This is the insurance companies aren't going to pay for it. So this is going to become the haves and the have-nots. People who can afford vaccines and have the time to take their children, they're going to vaccinate them. People who can't afford them are not going to vaccinate their children. That is not public health.
Well, this is yet another place where there's a nuanced position, which is it is reasonable to look over the emergency authorization for COVID because it is no longer an emergency. Let it go through the normal channels to be approved. In between, you need a bridge for vulnerable people who can still get it during that time. And that's the way you do careful public health.
By the way, Kennedy's own family, including his sister Kerry, including former Congressman Joe, have called for him to resign, and they've been very critical of him. Let me turn to another topic now, which is the victims of Jeffrey Epstein standing before cameras and making their case.
My name is Anushka DeGiorgio, and I stand before you today as a survivor of both Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell.
When a friend of mine in the neighborhood told me that I could make $300 to give an older guy a massage, it went from a dream job to the worst nightmare.
So Mary Catherine, Trump calls this a Democrat hoax, but isn't it mainly MAGA people who are, I don't want to say obsessed with this case, but feel like most of this has not come out and are sympathizing with some of those victims?
I think concern about this case and the fact that it smelled from the beginning is bipartisan and mainstream, given that there's this Netflix documentary. Like, once you hit that point, a lot of people are paying attention. This is a reminder that there are real victims, that is not just a political football.
Right.
And because of that, some of the grand jury testimony, some of the documents cannot be released depending on how the victims feel about that or what NDAs that they are subject to. But I think it's fair to ask for transparency on this. The interesting thing politically is that I think anytime you put his base and Trump at odds, Trump's coming out on the winning side of that.
Well, Trump, the president, has not reacted, Megyn, to the stories of these women, some of whom were abused as young as 14 by Epstein, and they say Ghislaine Maxwell, who's still in prison, but it's certainly not a hoax to them.
Right.
No, absolutely. And that press conference really humanized them in a way that I don't think people were expecting, because they had not had voices or names and faces to these accusations. But I do think on a political aspect here, these campaign ads are writing themselves. Democrats are going to go after these Republicans saying, you're protecting pedophiles, you're protecting sex traffickers. What are you protecting? What are you scared of? And I just think that is a bad place to be going into the midterms.
Spoken as a true operative, these are campaign ads, and you're probably right.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.